Hello everyone and welcome to the New York Empoleons Week 4 Team Builder of the SDA. We are here this week taking on the Rome Empoleons, coached by Aaron12. Of course, you know him. You've seen him a bunch of times recently. I don't know why, but we keep facing off in the same leagues at the same time. Pretty much every season, it feels like around weeks 3 to 5, we end up facing Aaron at some point and have to just assert Empoleon dominance once more. But his team is actually incredibly horrifying this week, specifically, mostly on the grounds that he's drafted like a LAN player would draft, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So his team is Latios, Zarude, Cryogonal, Emolga, Miltank, Suicune, Nidoqueen, Cubfu, Centiskorch, Sylveon, and Registeel. So really interesting speed tiering because it only goes from 50 to 110. So we do have the upper end at 130. And we also have the lower end as well. So he can't, not that his team is based around any sort of Trick Room shenanigans, but that is something to keep in mind, that we have both the upper and lower end of the speed tiers in this matchup. Now, I know I said literally last week that I was gonna start putting Mew at the end, but I actually wanted to start with the Mew this week because this entire team is predicated around the fact that Mew got spikes in Generation 8. That's it. Spikes is unbelievable in this matchup. He has plenty of removal options. I need to know where it's going to be, and it could be in a bunch of different places. He has Emolga and Latios and Cryogonal all immune to spikes that are removal options. But Emolga's the only one that wants to run it. Latios may be forced to run it because of how good spikes are, but Emolga is the only one that he could bring that I'm like, okay, it wouldn't waste a move slot putting Defog on. So that's the only one that wants to run it, but this Mew is entirely support. It is spikes, roar, soft-boiled, and knockoff. Shuts down the Suicune, can't set up in front of me, roar it out of there. Shuts down, I don't know, the Centiskorch if it wants to start sub-coiling or something, get it out of there. Shuts down Registeel if it's Iron Defense Body Press, get it out of there. I don't want to see any of that. I want 25% more chip. Knockoff gets rid of leftovers, and we can, or the boots mostly on things like the Centiskorch, and we move on with the game. The problem is his team is so bulky and so incredibly difficult that if I just can start everything at 75%, I have a much better chance of winning this game. This is not a lead, though. This is not something I'm just going to throw out at the beginning of the game and do. It's something I'm going to have to, over the course of the battle, work on making sure I actually find opportunities to set up 1, maybe 2 layers of spikes, and continue to wear his team down and continue to keep mine healthy wherever possible, maybe only losing a couple of support mons and keeping my health, my important sweepers in the back. But next up, we have what probably will end up being my lead, though is not a guarantee for sure. Drapion here is going to be rocking out the Earthquake, Poison Jab, Knockoff, and the Rock Slide. Doesn't OHKO like anything. Nidoqueen lives in Earthquake. Centiskorch, if it's super bulky, can potentially take a Rock Slide. But Knockoff is super good against his roster. And I have a Shuka Berry, so I can take 1, with the investment I have, I can take 1 Life Orb, Max Special Attack, Modest, Sheer Force, Earth Power from Nidoqueen. So the Shuka Berry allows me to take that. And so as a lead, if he leads Nidoqueen, thinking he's going to try to get a Toxic Spikes and that I have no switch into it, and he's right, I can either knock off right away, get rid of the Life Orb, or I can straight up EQ and do like 80% to it and put it down in range of spikes later from Mew, so I don't have to worry as much about my lack of switch-ins to it. That said, this thing is not a sweeper. It's not even really a mon that I expect to see after turn, 12. It's a mon that's going to be used early, and the only reason to preserve it is because it removes Toxic Spikes. Other than that, I use it early. It has a decent speed tier against his roster. I click Knockoff as much as I possibly can, and I Rock Slide if I need to against Centiskorch and Emolga, and I Earthquake if I can against Nidoqueen to break that thing, or against like Registeel after I've already clicked Knockoff on it, or whatever. So this thing is not going to be breaking his whole team down, despite it being very offensive looking. It's mostly just to early game break, eventually set me up for spikes in the mid to late game. Next up is the other mod I'll be using early, trying to set up rocks. Moonblast is just fine neutral coverage for his roster. I wanted like 15 moves in this thing, guys. I don't even want to tell you how many times I went back and forth on different moves. I think Heal Bell is the one that I'm going to settle on, but I think Teleport has a very, very viable place here in this matchup. I wish I could have Knockoff on this. I wish I could have Fire Blast on this. I want like everything, but you can't have that. You get 4 slots. So we went with Soft Boiled, Moonblast, Stealth Rock, and Heal Bell. Mostly because I think this game's going to stall out a little bit in the middle potentially, and I just want to be able to outlast my opponent. So between Mew soft-boiling and Clefable soft-boiling and heal-belling and Spikes being down and knockoffs coming out early in the game, I think I'll be able to hopefully outlast my opponent and push myself into the late game. And that's where we're going to start talking about... okay, let's actually talk about one more Mon before we start talking about the late game, because Quagsire is here mostly because I don't have a switch into Nidoqueen. It's not really a switch into Nidoqueen either, but I don't have one. And it also kind of checks Latios, maybe a little. Between Haze stopping setup options and Toxic wearing it down. His team doesn't appreciate Toxic overall, although he could have Heal Bell on the Sylveon or the Miltank, so I do have to watch out for that. But this thing is another Mon that just has recovery and can get me... Like, I'm going to be not necessarily totally dirtling the entire first half of this battle or more, but I'm going to be trying to position myself to the point where I have everything chipped enough for my 2 Mons that have any offensive presence to actually do work. A thing I could never do if we're not playing on land, but we are, so I'm gonna give it a shot because it's the only way I see to break his incredibly fat team on his end. And so we have this thing. It's just going to be chilling, hanging out. It's water absorbed because it shuts down the Suicune. I wanted to switch into the Nidoqueen and the Latios. I needed the most specially defensive thing I could find, and that was Quagsire. So hopefully it does its job. But one of my 2 sweepers, if I can get into position for it, is the Noctowl. We are rocking out with a Lumberry sub-Calm mindset. Basically, if I can get a safe switch in, because in the mid game, a lot of things on my side are going to start dying. I will get a safe switch in. I have enough speed to outspeed uninvested Suicune. So if I come in against the Suicune, I sub. If he clicks Toxic, that doesn't bother me. If he clicks Toxic and he outspeeds, I get the Lumberry to pop, and then I'm going to be able to sub anyway for free. So that's really what I was planning to do with this Noctowl, is just make sure that sub gets down, because then I can start Calm Minding. I really would love to outspeed the Suicune, because if I can get to +1, Scald doesn't break the sub. If I can get to +1, Sylveon's Moonblast doesn't break the sub unless he's max special attack and modest. And I am expecting him to run Moonblast because I do have access to Soundproof on Como-O on my roster. So he probably isn't going to run Hyper Voice and just let me have Como-O for free against Sylveon. I expect the Moonblast. That's why I think he'll run it. But the other really important thing about Noctowl is that I'm running a ton of HP investment, because that puts me at 205 HP. And for anyone who plays any sort of showdown, you know that you want to hit that number, because if you can get a 51 HP substitute, or in a level 101 HP substitute, Seismic Toss isn't breaking it, and that's what we're going to do. So he has a Miltank and a Registeel that both love to spam Seismic Toss, and I'm just going to be able to sub on them, take a hit, not break the sub, Calm Mind once, Roost on the next one, sub again. S-Toss never breaks the sub. I can just infinitely Calm Mind and substitute, get the Roost off, and eventually start spamming Hurricane. At +3, Hurricane kills everything not named Sylveon and not specially defensive Suicune. At +5, we're killing his entire roster. Do I expect to get to +5? No. But if this thing can even threaten him to the point where his Mons are just... like, he has to sack something to go into Zarude or one of his physical attackers that outspeeds me, which is mostly Zarude, but could potentially be a Mulga or maybe Miltank, depending on the set. I just am able to switch out, and I have all the bulk in the world, so I can just do it again later on one of his defensive options. But again, the Lumberry helps me against switching in directly to the Registeel. If he wants to go for like a T-Wave or a Toxic, the first time that happens, I can just shrug it off and move on and not have to worry about it. So that's really what this thing is designed to do. 25% from rocks sucks if he sets them up, but it's not the end of the world, because again, I don't take enough from a Seismic Toss to actually break the substitute. And lastly, we do have that Como-O. It is going to be rocking out with the Soundproof, just in case the Sylveon does want to run Hyper Voice. I don't know why he would do that, but if he does, we have the options here. And it is a sub-select Belly Drum Como-O, because it's just so good in this matchup. And if I can get it off, it's going to be endgame scenarios. I just can't let this thing come in early at all. I can't let it take any damage early. I can't let it come in early. I really don't want there to be toxic spikes in the field. I really don't want there to be rocks if I can avoid it, although rocks don't ruin the setup. They just make it a little bit more difficult. But +6 Drain Punch, Oko's Latios. So I didn't need Dragon Stab, and Iron Head is there for Sylveon. Centiscorch is a pain because it could Flame Body burn me, but I'm getting enough health back with Drain Punch that he's never going to outpace me with damage. Additionally, Iron Head kills the Nidoqueen, and I'm just going to be able to pound through his team at +1. I outspeed his entire roster that isn't Scarfed, and we're going to be able to do work. If I can keep the sub up, that would be ideal, though the likelihood of that is quite low. Now, the one thing I need to check for is things like Roar Suicune and stuff like that, but I don't think he's going to run those sets, and I also have Soundproof, so it would actually have to be Whirlwind that would get me to phase out. So I do think I'll be able to manage this fight if I can keep my 2 offensive Mons in the back ready to go for like mid-game when his stuff is starting to get chipped, after I found ways in for my Mew to get spikes down and my Clefable to get rocks up. And if he doesn't have removal, it's just going to be over right there. And if he does have removal, well then fine. We're going to play this song and dance for 10 minutes because I need to find a way to break his team down slowly, knock things off, and eventually get Noctowl and my Como-O opportunities to win. And that's my win con. That's all I've got this week. I don't have a lot of ways to beat his team. His team is just so fat, and I usually draft a lot of breakers on a team, but I didn't actually draft that many this time. So we're going to see how this goes. I'm kind of excited. It's just a really ridiculous matchup, but it's going to be a really fun battle either way, and you should definitely check it out, and definitely check out my opponent's channel to see what he's bringing to counter the crazy stuff that I am known to bring. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys all back here tomorrow with that battle. Take care, everybody.